The Texas sun had already burned away the morning dew by the time Nathan Cross reached the cemetery on the hill outside Redstone Valley. July heat pressed down on everything like a hand, turning the air thick and heavy with the smell of dry grass and limestone dust. Nathan dismounted slowly, his boots hitting packed earth with a sound that seemed too loud in the stillness. His horse, a gray mare named Ash, stamped once and then went quiet, as if she understood that this place demanded silence. Nathan stood there for a long moment, hat in his hands, staring at a grave marker that bore no name. Just a date, June 14th, 1884. 1 month ago. 1 month since Sarah Hayes had died, and Nathan had been 200 miles away, living his careful, controlled life on a ranch he had built specifically to keep the world at a distance. He had not known she was sick, had not known she was dying, had not known until a letter arrived 3 weeks late, forwarded through two different territories, that the woman he had loved and abandoned 10 years ago was already in the ground. Nathan was 42 years old. His hair, once solid black, now showed threads of silver at the temples. His face carried the deep lines that came from years of sun and wind, and the kind of loneliness that carved itself into a man's features, whether he wanted it there or not. He had spent the last 7 years alone on his ranch, and most days he told himself that was exactly how he wanted it. Most days he almost believed it. But standing here in front of this unmarked grave, feeling the weight of a decade's worth of cowardice pressing down on his chest, Nathan could not lie to himself anymore. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a photograph, the edges worn soft from handling. Sarah at 19, standing in front of a boarding house in Redstone Valley. Her dark hair pulled back, her smile tentative but real. Nathan had taken this picture himself back when he still believed that wanting something was enough to make it right. Back before his father had made it clear that a cross son did not marry a seamstress, did not throw away his future on a girl with nothing to her name but needle skills and a gentle heart. Nathan had been 32 then, old enough to know better, young enough to be a coward. The memory came unbidden, sharp as broken glass. His father, Charles Cross, waiting for him at the train station that morning, face gray with the illness that would kill him 6 months later. The old man's hand on Nathan's shoulder, heavy with expectation and manipulation in equal measure. "Son, I am dying. The doctors give me 6 months, maybe less. This ranch, everything I have built, it all goes to you, but only if you make the right choice. Marry the Williams girl. Her father will invest in our operation. Or marry that seamstress and watch everything I worked for crumble to dust. Choose carefully. I will not be here to fix your mistakes." Nathan had chosen, had left Sarah standing on the platform, the promise he had made her the night before already turning to ash in his mouth. Had told himself it was the right thing, the responsible thing, that he would come back for her once his father was gone, once the ranch was secure. But his father had died, and Nathan had inherited everything, and the guilt had grown so heavy that coming back seemed impossible, seemed like it would only make things worse. So he had stayed away, had built his walls higher, had convinced himself that Sarah had moved on, found someone else, lived a good life, somewhere far from the boy who had broken his promises to her. He had been wrong. The letter that reached him 3 weeks ago had shattered that comfortable lie. Sarah Hayes died of typhoid fever, left behind two daughters, Claire age 9 and Ren age 5. Services already held. Thought you should know. And then in smaller letters beneath, in a different hand, Sarah said, "Once if you ever came back to tell you to protect her daughters. The girls are being sent east on the orphan train. Auction in Redstone Valley." July 28th. Today was July 28th. Nathan folded the photograph carefully and placed it at the base of the unmarked stone. He had ordered a proper headstone, would have it shipped from Denver, would make sure Sarah's name was carved in marble, so deep that time could not erase it. But that would take weeks. For now there was only this blank marker and the knowledge that he was 10 years too late for apologies. He did not pray, did not know what to say to a God who let good women die young while cowards lived on. He just stood there, feeling the heat soak through his black coat, feeling an odd tightness in his chest that had been coming more frequently these past months. His heart beat with an irregular rhythm, skipping and stuttering, in a way that reminded him his own father had died at 50 of a sudden stroke. Nathan was 42. If he followed his father's pattern, he had 8 years left, maybe less. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, it just made the weight on his chest feel heavier. 8 years was not enough time to undo 10 years of damage, but it might be enough time to do one thing right. He put his hat back on mounted ash and rode toward town. The orphan train had pulled into Redstone Valley the night before, and by mid-morning the platform in front of the church was already crowded with curious townspeople and prospective families. Nathan tied Ash behind the general store and walked through the gathering, keeping to the edges, his eyes scanning the line of children arranged along the back of the wooden platform like goods awaiting inspection. He spotted them immediately, two girls at the far end of the line. The older one had auburn hair that caught the light, braided tight, but already escaping in wisps around her face. She stood with her shoulders back and her chin up, one hand gripping the shoulder of a smaller girl beside her. The younger child was pale blonde, almost white-haired in the harsh sunlight, and she held a stuffed rabbit, missing one ear, pressed against her chest like a shield. Nathan's breath caught. Even from this distance, even through 10 years, in the changes that time carved into inherited features, he could see Sarah in both of them. The older girl had her mother's sharp chin and fierce eyes. The younger one had her delicate bone structure, her slight frame. His daughter's. Maybe. Probably. The thought hit him like a fist to the stomach, leaving him dizzy and sick and desperate all at once. He had no way to know for certain. Sarah had been 2 months pregnant when he left, or so he had suspected from the way she had been sick in the mornings, from the careful way she had not quite met his eyes when he said goodbye. But she had never told him, had never given him the burden of knowing, had let him walk away with the easier lie that maybe, just maybe, there was nothing to stay for. Nathan made himself breathe, made himself stay still, while the auctioneer, a man with a voice like oil sliding over gravel, worked his way down the line. A boy of 12 went to a farmer needing field hands. Twin girls 7 years old went to a couple who wanted to raise them as their own. A toddler barely walking went to a woman who held him like he was made of glass. Then the auctioneer reached the two girls at the end. Lot 14, the man called out, checking his papers. Ren Hayes, age 5, healthy, quiet, no behavioral concerns, would make an excellent addition to any family seeking a young daughter. One of the matrons, a tired-looking woman in gray, guided the small blonde girl forward. The child moved like she was underwater, slow and disconnected, her green eyes fixed on nothing. She clutched the rabbit tighter. Now this one is a real sweetheart. The auctioneer continued, his voice taking on the practiced warmth of a man selling something he wanted gone. Quiet as a church mouse. Won't give you a lick of trouble. Perfect age for molding. Start fresh with this little lady, and you will have yourself a proper daughter before you know it. A couple near the front, well-dressed and prosperous-looking, leaned together and whispered. The woman nodded. The man raised his hand. We are interested, he said. My wife has been wanting a daughter just this age. Excellent, excellent. The auctioneer beamed. The placement fee is... Wait! The word cut through the humid air like a blade. Nathan turned to see the older girl push through the line of children, stumbling past the matron who tried to grab her arm. She reached her sister and dropped to her knees, wrapping both arms around the smaller girl with a ferocity that made the crowd go still. Wait, the older girl said, her voice shaking but clear. You cannot. She is my sister. We go together. They promised we would go together. Ma'am, sir, the auctioneer said, his smile tightening at the edges. Lot 15 is the older sister, available separately if you are interested in both. We do not want the older one, the woman said, not even looking at the girl kneeling on the platform. She is too old, and I have heard she is difficult. I am not difficult. The older girl's voice cracked. I am her sister. I take care of her. She needs me, though. Child, please? The matron reached for the girl's arm again. We discussed this. Not every family can take two. You promised. The girl twisted away, pulling the smaller child closer. Mrs. Patterson said we would stay together. She said if I was good, if I did not cause trouble, if I... Claire, the matron's voice softened, but her hands did not stop reaching. Mrs. Patterson is not here, and the Hendersons have offered a good home for your sister, a real home with a mother and father. And I am her family. Claire screamed it, the word tearing out of her like something that had been caged too long. Because I am the one who held her when Mama died. I am the one who fed her when they forgot at the orphanage. I am the one who... That is quite enough. The auctioneer's patience evaporated. Someone restrain this child before she... You cannot have her without me. Claire threw herself over Wren, completely shielding her sister's body with her own. The matron and two other adults tried to pull them apart. The older girl held on with a strength that seemed impossible for her size. And throughout it all, the younger child made no sound. She just pressed her face into her sister's neck and gripped that one-eared rabbit like it was the only real thing left in the world. Nathan watched something fall out of Claire's pocket as she struggled. Something small and metallic that hit the wooden platform with a soft clink and skittered toward the edge. Nathan moved without thinking, his boots carrying him forward before his brain caught up. He reached the platform steps and bent down, picking up the object before it could fall through the gap in the boards. It was a knife. Small, decorative, the kind a gentleman might carry for cutting cigars or opening letters. The handle was bone-yellowed with age, and carved into it were two letters. N.C. Nathan Cross, the knife he had given Sarah 10 years ago, the night he told her he loved her, the night before he left and never came back. He had thought it was lost, had assumed she threw it away, or sold it, or burned it in anger at his betrayal. But she had kept it, and somehow it had ended up in her daughter's pocket, carried like a talisman, or a weapon, or a secret too important to leave behind. Nathan looked up at the platform, at the two girls locked together in desperate defiance, at the crowd beginning to shift with discomfort, people looking away, crossing arms, shaking heads at the well-dressed couple, stepping back, calculation clear on their faces. Too much trouble, too much drama. Not worth it. He looked at the knife in his palm, at his own initials carved into bone. Then he climbed the steps. The sound of his boots on wood made people turn. Nathan was a big man, 6'2" of ranch work in sun-weathered leather, with a jaw that looked like it had been carved from the same limestone that made up the Colorado hills. He had the kind of presence that made spaces feel smaller, made people pay attention whether they wanted to or not. How much? Nathan said. The auctioneer blinked. I am sorry. For both of them, how much? Silence, the kind that made the cicada sound loud. Mr. Cross, the auctioneer, recovered barely. I did not realize you were interested in... I am not interested in repeating myself. Nathan kept his eyes on the girls. Claire was staring up at him with an expression caught between hope and suspicion, like she had learned the hard way that hope was just another word for disappointment. Wren had not moved, her face still buried in her sister's shoulder. How much for both? Well, the standard placement fees is $15 per child, but there are additional costs for... Nathan pulled his wallet from his coat, counted out bills with steady hands, laid them on the podium. That is $100. That covers placement, travel expenses, and whatever else you are about to invent a fee for. I want the papers drawn up today. Legal and binding. Both girls. My name. Mr. Cross, with all due respect, you are a single man, a bachelor. The board typically prefers... The board can prefer whatever it likes. Nathan did not raise his voice. Did not need to. I have 12,000 acres, a house with more rooms than I can count, and the means to provide for 2 children better than anyone else standing in this yard. You want to argue about it? We can argue in front of Judge Reed. I expect he will see things my way. The auctioneer looked at the money, looked at Nathan, looked at the crowd who were watching with mouths open. Nathan Cross, the hermit rancher, who had not been seen in town more than twice a year for the past 7 years buying 2 orphan girls. They would talk about this until winter. I will have the papers ready within the hour, the auctioneer said finally. Nathan turned back to the girls. Claire still had not loosened her grip on Wren, not 1 inch. She was looking up at Nathan with those burning eyes, and he could see the war happening behind them. Wanting to believe. Terrified to believe. Knowing that trust was just another way to get hurt. Nathan crouched down slowly, making himself smaller, meeting Claire at her level. Up close, the resemblance to Sarah was even stronger. The same stubborn set to the jaw, the same intelligence burning in eyes that had seen too much. I am not going to separate you, Nathan said quietly. That is the first thing. You and your sister stay together. That is not a negotiation. Claire's jaw trembled. Why? Because I heard what you said, and you are right. You are her family. But why do you want us? Claire's voice dropped to a whisper. Nobody wants both of us. They always want her because she is little and pretty. Or they want neither of us because I am too much trouble. Nobody wants both. Nathan held out his hand, palm up, offering, not demanding. In his other hand, hidden from view, he still held the small knife with his initials carved in bone. Well, I expect nobody is me, he said. I am Nathan Cross. I have a ranch about 7 miles north of here. Big place, quiet. Lots of room for two girls who need a place to land. Claire looked at his hand like it might vanish. What do you want from us? Right now, just for you to come home with me. Get some food in you. Let your sister breathe somewhere that is not a platform. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. Beyond that, I figure we will work it out as we go. Claire searched his face for a long moment. Nathan let her look. He had nothing to hide. Nothing except the knife in his left hand, the photograph at the cemetery, and the truth about why he had really come to this auction. But those secrets could wait. Right now, what mattered was getting these two children somewhere safe. Wren does not talk, Claire said finally. She has not said a word since Mama died. That was a year ago. That is all right, Nathan said. I'm not much of a talker myself. And she gets scared at night, has nightmares. We will handle it. Claire's hand trembled as she reached out and placed it in Nathan's palm. Her fingers were small and rough, calloused in ways a 9-year-old's hands should not be, and they gripped his with a ferocity that said, I am trusting you and I will destroy you if you betray me, in the same breath. Nathan stood slowly, drawing Claire up with him. Wren came too, pressed against her sister's side, still silent. But as Nathan turned to leave the platform, the small girl's hand shot out and grabbed a handful of his coat. Not his hand, just his coat. Holding on. It was enough. The whispers started before they even reached the wagon. Nathan heard fragments as he guided the girls through the crowd. Claire walking beside him with her spine straight and her chin up. Wren riding on his hip because she had reached for him with her eyes and he had understood. Lost his mind. 2 girls. What is a bachelor going to do with 2 girls? Probably send them back inside a month. Pour things out of one bad situation into another. Nathan kept walking. Let them talk. He had spent 7 years not caring what Redstone Valley thought of him. He was not about to start now. His wagon was parked behind the general store, already loaded with the supplies he had come to town for before the auction. Barbed wire, salt licks, coffee. The things a ranch needed. He set Wren on the bench seat first, then helped Claire up. The older girl climbed mostly on her own, refusing to need more help than she had to accept. Nathan checked the horses, climbed up beside them, and drove north out of Redstone Valley without looking back. They rode in silence for the first mile. The road wound through hill country that rolled green and gold under the summer sun. Live oaks providing patches of shade that felt like small mercies. Cattle grazed in distant pastures. A hawk circled overhead with the patience of things that knew how to wait. Claire sat between Nathan and the edge of the bench, creating a buffer between her sister and this stranger who had just bought them. Wren leaned against Claire's left side, the stuffed rabbit pressed between them. You scared? Nathan asked without looking at Claire. She was quiet for a moment. Should I be? Probably not, but I expect you will be anyway until you have reason not to be. Most people would tell me I do not need to be scared, that everything is going to be fine. Most people are liars. Nathan adjusted his grip on the reins. I am not going to tell you which thing is fine because I do not know that yet. What I know is this. You will have a roof over your heads tonight that does not leak. You will have food that is better than what you have been eating. You will have beds, your own beds in your own rooms if you want them, or the same room if that is what you and Wren need. Same room, Claire said immediately. I need to be able to reach her at night. Same room then. Another mile passed. Wren had fallen asleep against Claire's shoulder, the rabbit tucked under her chin. Her breathing was slow and even. The sleep of a child who had learned to rest whenever safety presented itself, because she never knew when it would come again. Nathan could feel Claire watching him, studying him, trying to figure out what kind of man picks up 2 strange children on a Tuesday morning and takes them home. Finally, she spoke. Can I ask you something? You are going to ask whether I say yes or not. I can tell. The ghost of a smile crossed Claire's face. First one Nathan had seen. Are you rich? I do all right. That is what rich people say when they do not want to admit they are rich. Claire looked at him sideways. $100 is a lot of money. It is. And you just had it in your wallet like it was nothing. It was not nothing. Nathan kept his eyes on the road. It was you and your sister. Claire absorbed this. Then carefully, like she was testing the weight of each word before she spoke it, she asked, "Did you know our mother?" Nathan, his hands tightened on the reins. The question he had been waiting for. The question he did not have a good answer to. "Why do you ask that?" "Because you came to the auction looking for us specifically. I could tell. You were not surprised when you saw us. You knew what you were looking for." Smart. Too smart. Nathan should have expected that. Sarah had been brilliant in her quiet way, had seen through his excuses and his carefully constructed justifications, even when he was spinning them. Of course, her daughter would have inherited that clarity. "I knew your mother a long time ago," Nathan said finally, "before you were born." "How long ago?" 10 years, give or take." Claire was silent for a moment, processing. "Then, did you love her?" Nathan's throat closed. He swallowed twice before he could speak. "Yes." "Then why did you leave?" The question hit like a fist. Nathan pulled the wagon to a stop, needing to not be moving for this conversation. The horses stamped and blew, grateful for the rest. Wrens stirred but did not wake. Nathan turned to look at Claire directly. She deserved that much. Deserved to see his face when he told her the truth. "Because I was a coward," he said. "Because my family did not approve of her. Because I chose the easy road over the right one. Because I was 32 years old and stupid enough to think that wanting something was the same as deserving it." Claire's eyes were very bright. "Did she know you loved her?" "Yes." "She was already gone." He paused. "When I learned she had 2 daughters being sent away on the orphan train, I knew I had to find you. I owed her that much. I owed you that much." It was true. All of it was true. But it was not the whole truth. The whole truth included the photograph at the cemetery. The sick certainty in Nathan's gut that these might be his daughters. The bone-deep need to know if the child Sarah had been carrying when he left had grown into the fierce 9-year-old sitting beside him now. But Claire did not need to know that yet. Maybe would never need to know if Nathan could not find a way to confirm it that would not destroy whatever fragile trust they were building. Claire wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I do not know if I can forgive you for leaving her. I am not asking you to." "Good, because I do not think I can." "That is fair." Claire looked at her sleeping sister, then back at Nathan. "But I think Mama would want us to have a home, and you are offering us one, so I guess we will try it. For her." Nathan nodded once, sharp and final. For her. He clicked the horses forward, and they continued north. Neither of them spoke again until the ranch came into view over the last hill. The main house sat solid and sprawling against the green hills, limestone and timber built to last. Barns and outbuildings spread behind it, corrals where horses dozed in the shade, and beyond them the pastures running out to the horizon dotted with cattle. Claire drew in a breath. "That is all yours." "Ours," Nathan corrected before he thought about it. Then he let the word stand because it felt right. "That is ours." The wagon pulled up to the front of the house. Before Nathan could set the brake, the front door opened and a woman appeared on the porch. Grace Hartwell was 30 years old, built like someone who had survived things that would have killed most people and come through with her spine intact. She had skin the color of warm earth eyes that missed nothing, and the kind of stillness that came from learning early that showing emotion was dangerous. She was also Nathan's half-sister, though neither of them had asked for that relationship. Grace's mother, Esther, had been enslaved by the Cross family before the war. Nathan's father, Charles Cross, had taken Esther as a mistress, a relationship built on power and ownership, rather than anything resembling love. Grace had been born in 1854, a child of that violence, freed legally after the war, but never truly free from the weight of her origins. Esther had died in 1879, leaving Grace with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. She had shown up at Nathan's ranch that same year, told him exactly who she was, and informed him that she would work as his housekeeper, because she had no other options. But that did not mean she had to like him, or respect him, or pretend they were family. Nathan had agreed to her terms, had given her a room in the house, fair wages, and as much distance as she needed. They lived in the same space, but separate orbits, circling each other with careful politeness that never quite became warmth. Now Grace stood on the porch and looked at the wagon, at the 2 small girls, at Nathan's face, and her expression went through half a dozen emotions in 2 seconds before landing on something that looked like Lord have mercy mixed with you, fool. Nathan Cross, Grace said. What have you done? Grace, this is Claire, and the little one sleeping is Wren. They are staying. Staying how staying like your horse is staying, staying like that stray cat you fed once and it never left, or staying like family. Grace's eyes moved from Nathan to Claire, who was standing by the wagon wheel with her chin up and her shoulders back, looking at the big house with an expression that mixed wonder and disbelief. Then Grace's gaze, sharp and focused, and Nathan saw the exact moment she recognized something in Claire's face. The shape of the jaw, the set of the eyes, the way she held herself defiant even when exhausted. Grace looked back at Nathan. Her expression had gone very still, very careful. We need to talk, she said quietly. Later. Yes. But right now these girls need food and beds. Grace came down the porch steps. She walked to where Claire stood and bent to the girl's level, her face softening in a way Nathan had never seen. Child, Grace said gently, when is the last time you ate a real meal? Claire thought about it. I do not remember. That is what I figured. Grace held out her hand. Come inside. I have stew on the stove and cornbread in the oven. By the time you have eaten your fill, we will figure out the rest. Claire looked at Grace's outstretched hand, looked at Nathan, who nodded, looked at Wren, still sleeping, against his shoulder. Then she took Grace's hand and let herself be led inside. Nathan followed, carrying Wren, and as he crossed the threshold of his house with a child in his arms, for the first time in 7 years of living alone, he felt something crack open in his chest. Not breaking, just cracking. Just enough to let something through that he had kept sealed away for so long. He had forgotten what it felt like. Hope, maybe, or fear, or the sick understanding that he had just set in motion something he could not control and could not take back. The kitchen was warm. The smell of stew and cornbread and coffee filled the space with a comfort Nathan had almost forgotten existed. Grace moved efficiently, ladling food into bowls, cutting thick slices of bread, still hot from the oven. Claire ate slowly but steadily, her eyes never quite relaxing their vigilance. Wren woke, looked around the unfamiliar room with frightened eyes, and immediately buried her face in Claire's shoulder. It is okay, Bird, Claire murmured, stroking her sister's hair. We are safe here. But Wren did not believe it. She just held tighter to her sister and to her one-eared rabbit, and Nathan felt his heart break a little more. This was what he was facing. Not just raising 2 little girls, but healing them, earning their trust one careful day at a time, knowing that he might fail, that his heart might give out like his father's had, that he might leave them worse off than he found them. When the meal was done, Grace showed them upstairs to the room Nathan had prepared. 2 beds with clean quilts, a lamp on the dresser that could burn low all night if they needed it, a window that looked out over the pastures where the evening sun was painting everything gold. Claire climbed into one bed, then immediately held out her arms for Wren. Nathan set the smaller girl beside her sister and watched Claire wrap around Wren like a shield, like she had done it 1,000 times, like it was the only thing that made sense in a world that had stopped making sense a year ago. You will be safe here, Nathan said quietly from the doorway. I promise you that much. Claire looked at him with those 2 old eyes. People break promises. Some people do, I do not. We will see. Nathan nodded, accepting that. Good night, Claire. He turned to leave. Mr. Cross. Nathan looked back. Claire had pulled something from under her pillow. Even in the low light, Nathan recognized it. The small knife with the bone handle, his initials carved deep. This fell out of my pocket today, Claire said. At the auction. I saw you pick it up. I want it back. Nathan walked back into the room, pulled the knife from his coat pocket, and held it out to her. Claire took it, closed her fingers around it, and met his eyes. This was Mama's, she said. A man gave it to her a long time ago, a man she loved, a man who left her. Claire's voice was very steady. That man was you, was it not? Nathan could have lied, should have lied, but he had promised himself that whatever else he did, he would not lie to these children about things that mattered. Yes, he said, that man was me. Claire nodded slowly, like he had confirmed something she already knew. So you did not just happen to be at the auction today. You came looking for us. I came looking for your mother. I found you instead. Why? Because 10 years is a long time to live with regret. Because I wanted to tell her I was sorry. Because Nathan stopped swallowed. Because I thought maybe there was a chance she had that there might be children. And if there were, I wanted to make sure they were all right. You wanted to know if we were yours, Claire said flatly. Yes. Are we? Nathan looked at her at Ren sleeping against her shoulder, at the fierce intelligence in those eyes that were so much like Sarah's. I do not know, he said honestly. Your mother and I were together for 6 months 10 years ago. When I left, I did not know if she was pregnant. I have no way to know for certain without. He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Without asking Mama, Claire finished for him. And she is dead, so you will never know. No, I do not think I will. Claire was quiet for a long time, her thumb running over the carved initials on the knife handle. Then she tucked it back under her pillow and looked at Nathan with an expression he could not read. I do not know if you are my father, she said slowly. Mama never told me who my father was, just that he was gone and he was not coming back. But I know one thing. She paused. If you were him, if you are the man who left her alone and pregnant, then you are the reason she had to work herself to death trying to feed us. You are the reason she was too weak to fight the fever when it came. Nathan flinched like she had hit him because she was right. If he was their father, if Sarah had been carrying his child when he left, then her death was his fault. The chain of cause and effect ran straight from his cowardice to her grave. You are right, he said hoarsely. If I am your father, then I killed your mother as surely as the fever did. Claire's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. Then why should I let you be anything to us now? Why should I trust you not to leave again? Because I cannot leave anymore. Nathan knelt beside the bed, bringing himself to her level. Because running away only works until you run out of places to run. Because I spent 7 years alone on this ranch trying to outrun what I did, and it did not work. The guilt followed me. The regret followed me. And now you and your sister are here. And maybe you are mine or maybe you are not. But either way, I owe your mother a debt I can never repay. And the only way I can even try is to make sure her daughters are safe and cared for and loved. You do not love us, Claire said. You do not even know us. No, but I loved your mother, and I will learn to love you if you let me try. Claire stared at him for a long, long moment. Then she lay down, pulling Ren closer, and turned her face to the wall. Good night, Mr. Cross. It was a dismissal. Nathan took it. He stood, walked to the door, and paused with his hand on the frame. For what it is worth, he said quietly, I am sorry. For everything I did and everything I did not do, I am sorry. Claire did not answer. Nathan left the door cracked open, the lamp burning low, and went downstairs. Grace was waiting for him in the kitchen, 2 cups of coffee on the table. She pointed at the chair across from her. Sit. Nathan sat. Grace pushed a cup toward him and studied his face with the intensity of someone reading a map in the dark. Those girls, she said finally, they are Sarah Hayes' daughters. Yes, the same Sarah Hayes you told me about, the one you left 10 years ago. Yes, and you think they might be yours. I do not know. I cannot know. Grace leaned back, shaking her head. Lord Nathan, you do not do anything halfway, do you? Could not just leave well enough alone? Could not just let the past stay buried? The past was never buried, Nathan said tiredly. It was always right here. He tapped his chest, eating me alive one day at a time. So you brought it into your house, gave it a name and a bed and a place at your table. I gave 2 orphan girls a home. You gave yourself a chance to play savior and call it redemption. Grace's voice was sharp. But redemption does not work like that, Nathan. You do not get to buy your way out of guilt with $100 and good intentions. I know that. Do you? Because from where I am sitting, that looks like you are trying to fix the past by stealing from the future. Those girls do not know if you are their father. You do not know. And instead of being honest with them, instead of giving them a choice, you just took them, bought them like cattle, and brought them home. I saved them from being separated, from being sent to different families, from losing the only person they have left in the world. Maybe, Grace said, or maybe you just made sure you would never have to face the truth. She leaned forward. What happens when they grow up and start asking questions? What happens when Claire figures out that you are not just some guilty stranger trying to do right, but the man who might be her father and chose not to claim her when it mattered? I will tell her the truth. Which truth that you do not know if you are her father, or that you do know and you are too much of a coward to face it? Nathan's hands tightened around the coffee cup. I do not know what you want from me, Grace. I want you to be honest with them and with yourself. Grace stood, picked up her cup. Those girls deserve better than a man who is using them to make himself feel less guilty. They deserve someone who will love them for who they are, not who they might be to him. She walked toward the stairs, then paused. And Nathan, if you hurt those children, if you let them down the way you let their mother down, I will make sure you regret it. Blood or no blood, I will make you pay. She climbed the stairs, leaving Nathan alone in the kitchen with cold coffee and the weight of everything he had set in motion. He sat there for a long time, listening to the house settle around him, listening to the soft sounds of two children sleeping upstairs, the creak of floorboards as Grace moved through her room, the tick of the clock on the mantel counting off seconds that felt like judgments. His chest felt tight again, that irregular heartbeat, skipping and stuttering. Nathan pressed his hand against his sternum and took a slow breath. Not now, not yet. He had too much to do, too much to make right before his body could betray him the way it had betrayed his father. Finally, when the coffee was cold and the lamp was burning low, Nathan stood and walked upstairs. He paused outside the girls' room, listening. He could hear Claire's breathing, quick and uneven, the breathing of someone pretending to sleep. Could hear Wren's softer, steadier rhythm. Nathan pressed his palm against the doorframe, a gesture that was half prayer and half apology, and then walked to his own room. He did not sleep, just lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, turning the knife problem over in his mind. The knife that proved he had known Sarah. The knife that Claire had kept, that she clutched like evidence or like hope or like a weapon she might use against him someday. The knife that raised the question he could not answer and could not escape. Were they his, and if they were, what did he owe them? What did they deserve from him that he was capable of giving? Nathan did not have answers, only the sick certainty that he had walked into a trap of his own making, and the only way out was through the lies and the truth and the space between them, where families were built on foundations of hope and fear and the desperate need to believe that second chances were real, even when first chances had been wasted. Outside, the Colorado night pressed close and hot. Inside, three people who did not know how to be a family tried to sleep under the same roof and failed. And down the hall behind a cracked door, Claire lay with her eyes open and her hand wrapped around a bone-handled knife, thinking about the man who might be her father, who had abandoned her mother, who had bought her and her sister-like property and called it rescue. Thinking about whether she could ever forgive him. Thinking about whether she even wanted to try him. The morning came too early and too bright. Nathan had not slept, had spent the night staring at the ceiling and listening to the unfamiliar sounds of children in his house. Small feet padding to the bathroom. The creak of bed springs as Claire shifted to check on her sister. The soft whimper that might have been a nightmare, followed by whispered reassurance that only an older sister could give. He was already in the kitchen when Grace arrived at dawn, already had coffee brewing and bread sliced for toasting. Grace took one look at his face and shook her head. You look like death. I feel like it. Good. Maybe that means you are thinking about what you have done. Grace tied on her apron and began pulling out eggs and butter. Those girls are going to wake up soon. You need to decide what kind of man you are going to be for them today. What do you mean? I mean you can keep lying to them and to yourself, or you can start telling the truth. Grace cracked eggs into a bowl with more force than necessary. Your choice, but make it fast because that older girl is too smart to fool for long. Nathan opened his mouth to respond, but the sound of footsteps on the stairs stopped him. Claire appeared in the doorway, already dressed in the same clothes from yesterday, her hair braided tight. She held something in her hand, something small that caught the morning light. The knife. She walked to the table without a word and set it down directly in front of Nathan's coffee cup. The bone handle gleamed pale against the dark wood. The initials NC stared up at him like an accusation. Claire sat down across from him, her green eyes steady and unblinking. I need you to answer a question, she said. And I need you to tell me the truth this time. Not part of the truth, all of it. Nathan looked at Grace, who had gone very still at the stove. She met his eyes and gave the smallest shake of her head, a warning or maybe permission. He could not tell. He turned back to Claire. All right. I saw a man with Mama the night she died. The words hit like a physical blow. Nathan set down his coffee cup with a hand that was not quite steady. What? I saw a man with Mama the night she died. Claire's voice was flat now, carefully controlled, like she had practiced this speech in her head all night. I was supposed to be asleep, but I heard voices. I came downstairs and I saw him through the crack in the door. Nathan felt the air leave his lungs. Claire, a tall man, dark hair, gray at the temples. He wore an expensive suit, and he had a ring. A big gold ring on his right hand with a red stone. Grace had turned from the stove, now listening. He was arguing with her, Claire continued. And then Mama started shaking, started choking, and the man left, just walked out while she was dying on the floor. The kitchen had gone completely silent. Even the clock seemed to have stopped ticking. When you showed up at the auction, Claire said, her voice barely above a whisper now, when I realized you knew Mama, I thought you were the man who killed her. That is why I have been carrying this knife. I was going to... She stopped, swallowed hard. I was going to use it if you tried to hurt Ren. Nathan felt something cold slide down his spine. Claire, I swear to you on everything I have, I was not there. I was 200 miles away on my ranch. I did not even know your mother was in Redstone Valley. I thought she had moved east years ago. Then who was he? Claire's voice cracked. Who was the man who poisoned my mother? The word poisoned hung in the air like smoke. What makes you think she was poisoned? Nathan asked carefully. Because she was fine that morning. Tired but fine. We had breakfast together. She was working on a dress for one of the rich ladies in town. Claire's hands trembled on the table. And then that man came and they argued and he gave her tea. I saw him pour it. I saw her drink it. And within an hour she was... Claire's voice broke. Grace turned from the stove, her face grave. Child, that is a serious accusation. I know what I saw. Claire's eyes blazed. And I have been too scared to say anything because nobody would believe a 9-year-old girl over a rich man. But now I have you. She looked at Nathan. You owed Mama something. You said so yourself. So here is how you pay that debt. You help me find out who killed her. And you help me make sure he pays for what he did. Nathan looked at this fierce, damaged child who was asking him to solve a murder, who was asking him to go up against people with money and power and connections, who was asking him to risk everything he had built, everything he had protected himself with for 7 years. He should say no, should tell her she was wrong, that grief had made her see things that were not there, that her mother had died of natural causes, and nothing he did could change that. But he looked at her face, at the desperate certainty burning in her eyes, and he knew she was telling the truth. Or at least she believed she was telling the truth, and maybe that was the same thing. All right, Nathan said, tell me everything you remember about that night. Everything about the man, what he looked like, what they argued about, every detail you can recall. Claire's shoulders sagged with relief, so profound it was almost physical. He was tall, taller than you. He had gray in his hair at the temples. He wore expensive clothes, a suit, and he had a ring, a big gold ring on his right hand with a red stone. Did you hear what they argued about? Claire closed her eyes, reaching back into memory. He said something about Mama needing to keep her mouth shut, about how certain people would not appreciate her spreading rumors. Mama told him she was not spreading rumors. She was telling the truth. And he said the truth was dangerous, that she had a family to think about, that we would be taken care of if she just... Claire's eyes snapped open. If she just burned the dress. The dress, Nathan leaned forward. What dress? The one she was making for Mrs. Victoria Ashford, the richest woman in Redstone Valley. Claire's voice gained strength as the pieces connected. Mama had been working on it for weeks, a fancy ball gown with layers and layers of silk. She brought it home to work on the hem, and that is when she found it. Found what? Papers. Tucked into the lining of the bodice. Mama did not mean to see them. She was just taking apart an old dress Mrs. Ashford had given her for material, and the papers fell out. Claire looked at Nathan. I do not know what they said. Mama would not tell me, but she was upset, really upset. She kept saying she did not know what to do, that she could not just ignore it, that people needed to know. Nathan's mind was racing. What happened to the dress and the papers? I do not know. After Mama died, everything happened so fast. The landlady came and took our things for back rent. Ren and I were sent to the orphanage. I tried to find the dress, but it was gone. Everything was gone. Grace had moved closer, listening with an intensity that made her stillness feel dangerous. Mrs. Victoria Ashford, she said slowly, wife of Judge William Ashford, the man who handles all the legal matters for the territorial government, the man who controls half the land deals in 3 counties. You know them, ma'am? Nathan asked. I worked in their house. Grace's voice was flat, carefully empty of emotion. 12 years ago, before I came here, before I had a choice about where I worked. She paused. I know that family very well. What are they like? Grace was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, each word was chosen with surgical precision. Judge Ashford is a man who believes the law exists to serve those who can afford to use it. Victoria Ashford is a woman who believes her position in society is a divine right that must be protected at any cost. She paused. And their daughter-in-law, Marianne Ashford, is a woman who has learned to be cruel from the best teachers. Nathan felt the pieces shifting, forming a picture he did not want to see. If Victoria Ashford was hiding something in that dress, he said slowly, something important enough to kill for, then we are talking about people who can destroy us without a second thought. People who own the judge, the sheriff, half the town council, Grace finished. People who could make us disappear and no one would ask questions. I do not care. Claire's voice was fierce. Mama is dead. Someone killed her, and I am not going to let them get away with it just because they are rich. Nathan looked at Grace. She looked back at him, her expression unreadable. Then she gave the smallest nod. The girl is right, Grace said. If someone killed Sarah Hayes to protect the Ashford family's secrets, and those girls are living under your roof, how long before whoever did it decides they are loose ends that need tying up? The thought hit Nathan like ice water. He had been so focused on his own guilt, his own need for redemption, that he had not considered the girls might be in actual danger. That by bringing them here, by connecting himself to Sarah's death, he might have painted a target on all of them. All right, he said, standing. We investigate. Quietly, carefully. We find out what Sarah knew. What she found in that dress and who had reason to silence her. But Claire, you have to promise me something. What? You do not do anything on your own. You do not confront anyone. You do not put yourself or your sister at risk. We do this together or we do not do it at all. Claire studied his face, measuring his sincerity. Then she nodded. Together. Good. Now sit down and eat. We have a long day ahead of us. The sound of footsteps made them all turn. Wren stood in the doorway, her blonde hair tangled from sleep, the rabbit clutched in her arms. She looked at the 3 of them gathered around the table at the knife gleaming in the morning light, and her green eyes went very wide. Then she walked straight to Claire, climbed into her sister's lap, and buried her face in Claire's shoulder. It is all right, Bird, Claire murmured, stroking her sister's hair. Everything is all right. But it was not all right, and they all knew it. The pretense of safety had been shattered. Now they were co-conspirators in something dangerous, something that could destroy them all. They spent the rest of the morning planning. Grace knew the Ashford house, knew the layout and the servants' schedules. Claire remembered which room, which wardrobe, from the time she had accompanied her mother to fittings. And Nathan, who had spent 7 years avoiding the complicated world of Redstone Valley society, now found himself mapping out a strategy to infiltrate the home of its most powerful family. Victoria Ashford attends the charity board meeting every Thursday morning, Grace said. 10 o'clock. It runs for 2 hours, sometimes longer. That would be our window. How many servants in the house during that time? Nathan asked. 2. Martha in the kitchen preparing lunch. Samuel cleaning the judge's study. Both of them are... Grace paused. Both of them are people I knew. People who might look the other way if they saw me. Or people who might turn you in to save their own positions, Nathan said. That is a risk we take. They were still planning when Wren, who had been sitting quietly in Claire's lap, suddenly slipped down and walked to Nathan. She did not speak, did not look at him, just reached into the pocket of her nightgown and pulled out something small, holding it out to Nathan with both hands. It was a piece of fabric, silk, expensive, dyed a deep crimson, and embroidered in one corner in delicate gold thread were the initials V.A. Victoria Ashford. Nathan's heart stopped. Wren, where did you get this? Wren pointed at her rabbit. Nathan took the stuffed animal carefully and examined it. There in the seam along the rabbit's back was a small tear. He worked his fingers into the opening and felt more fabric inside. Carefully he pulled it out. More silk, more crimson. And when he unfolded it completely, he found a piece of paper tucked in the center, folded so small it was barely larger than his thumb. His hands shook as he opened it. The paper was covered in numbers, columns and columns of figures, dates, amounts. And at the top, in a neat accountant's hand, Territorial Charity Fund. Disbursements 1883. But the disbursements did not match the dates. Money that should have gone to orphanages and hospitals and schools for freed slaves had been redirected. And at the bottom of the page, in that same neat hand, was a name. Victoria C. Ashford, Administrator. Nathan looked at Wren. The child was watching him with an expression he could not read. Waiting. You have had this the whole time, he said softly, hidden in your rabbit. You knew it was important. Wren nodded. Does Claire know? Wren shook her head. Why did you not tell her? Wren opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. And then in a voice so small and rusty it barely counted as sound, she whispered, scared. Nathan's breath caught. You are talking. First time. Wren whispered, each word coming out slow and careful, like she was testing if her voice still worked. First time talking. Since Mama died. Except with a Claire. I talk to Claire when we are alone, but nobody else. Not for a whole year. Does Claire know you can talk to her? Yes, but she does not tell anyone because... Wren's face crumpled. The man, the one who hurt Mama. He said, if I told anyone what I saw, he would hurt Claire too. He said little girls who talk too much have accidents, she swallowed hard. So I stopped. Nathan pulled her into his arms, this tiny child who had been carrying such a terrible burden for a year, and felt something break inside his chest. Wren, listen to me. That man cannot hurt you. I will not let him. Do you understand? You are safe here. He said Mama would be safe too, Wren whispered against his shoulder, and then she died. Nathan had no answer to that, because she was right. Adults promise safety all the time and fail to deliver. Why should she trust him when experience had taught her that trust was just another word for disappointment? You are right, he said finally. I cannot promise nothing bad will ever happen. I cannot promise I will never fail. But I can promise I will fight for you. I can promise I will do everything in my power to keep you and Claire safe. And I can promise that if something does happen, I will not leave you to face it alone. He pulled back to look at her face. Is that enough? Wren studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded and handed him the rabbit. Keep it safe. The papers. Claire says they are why Mama died, so they must be important. They are very important, Nathan said, and very dangerous, which is why we are going to be very careful about what we do next. Are you going to catch the bad man? I am going to try. What if he catches you first? Nathan wanted to lie, wanted to tell her everything would be fine, that heroes always won and justice always prevailed. But Wren had already learned that adults who promised impossible things were liars. Then Claire will catch him, Nathan said. And if not Claire, then Grace. And if not Grace, then someone. Because the truth has a way of coming out eventually, even when people try to bury it. Wren nodded slowly, accepting sis. Then she took her rabbit back, tucked the fabric piece into the torn seam, and turned to leave. Wren, Nathan called softly. She looked back. Thank you for trusting me with this, for talking to me. I know it was hard. Not as hard as staying quiet, Wren whispered. And then she was gone, padding back down the hallway to the room she shared with her sister, leaving Nathan alone with stolen evidence and the weight of a murdered woman's final act of defiance. Sarah had known she was in danger, had known that keeping this evidence would put her at risk. But she had also known that hiding it was the only way to protect her daughters. So she had sewn it into the one thing Wren would never let go of, the one thing that would follow her daughter wherever she went. The rabbit was not just a comfort toy. It was a time bomb waiting for someone brave enough or desperate enough to pull the pin. And Nathan had just armed the trigger. The next 3 days passed in a careful dance of normalcy and investigation. Nathan worked the ranch during the day, riding fence lines and checking cattle, but his mind was always elsewhere. Claire helped Grace in the kitchen and played with Wren in the yard, but she watched everything with those sharp eyes, cataloging details, asking careful questions. And Wren drew. She drew constantly, her charcoal pencils moving across paper in steady strokes that created horses and houses and people. Grace noticed first that the drawings were not random. They were memories. The boarding house where the girls had lived with Sarah, the landlady who had taken their things, the church where the auction had been held, and one drawing done in careful detail of a tall man with gray at his temples and a ring on his right hand. "That is him," Claire said when she saw it. "That is the man from that night." Grace studied the drawing. "She has a gift. This is remarkably detailed for a 5-year-old. "Wren remembers everything," Claire said quietly. "She just does not talk about it." Nathan looked at the drawing, at the man's face rendered in charcoal shadow and light. "We need to find out who he is." "I know who he is," Grace said, her voice tight. "That is Richard Langley, Victoria Ashford's cousin. He handles her business affairs when the judge is too busy." Nathan felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Are you certain?" "I am certain." Grace's hands clenched at her sides. "I served him tea 100 times when I worked in that house. He is the kind of man who does not see servants as people, who talks about private matters in front of them because he assumes they are too stupid or too scared to remember." Her eyes met Nathan's. "I remember everything he said, every conversation I overheard, every dirty dealing he arranged." "Like what?" "Like stealing from the territorial charity fund, like falsifying land records to take property from homesteaders who could not read contracts, like bribing officials to look the other way when Victoria wanted something that was not legally hers." Grace's voice shook with a controlled fury, but there was something else there too, something deeper. She took a breath, and when she spoke again, her voice was quieter but no less intense. "I need to tell you what happened to me in that house, what they did." Nathan and Claire both went still. Grace walked to the window, looking out at nothing. "I was 18 years old. My mother had just died. I had nowhere else to go. The Ashfords took me in, but not out of kindness. I was property to them, even though the war had been over for years, even though I was supposed to be free." She turned back to face them. "One day I was bringing tea to the parlor. Victoria and Richard were talking. They did not know I was there, or they did not care. Richard said something about $15,000 from the charity fund, said no one would notice." Victoria laughed, said the orphanages were too scared to complain. Grace's jaw tightened. "I dropped a spoon. They heard." Victoria looked at me like I was a rat she had found in her kitchen. She asked me what I had heard. I lied, said I heard nothing, but she did not believe me. Claire had gone very quiet, her hand finding Wren's. She called for Samuel, the head butler, told him I needed to learn a lesson about listening to things that were not my business. Grace pulled up her sleeve, showing scars on her forearm, long, thin lines, faded but still visible. He took me to the stable, beat me with a riding crop. 5 strokes, told me the Ashfords could do worse if they wanted, that servants who talked died young. She should speak up, knowing that speaking up would put a target on my back. "Why did you never tell me?" Nathan asked quietly. "Because you were content in your isolation. Because I did not think you would care. Because," Grace's voice softened, "because I learned a long time ago that the world does not care what happens to women who look like me, especially when powerful white families are involved." "I care," Nathan said. "I should have asked. I should have known." "You did not want to know," Grace said, but there was no anger in it, just tired acceptance. "You wanted to keep the past buried. We both did. But now we have a chance to make it mean something, to use what I know to bring them down." "Then that is what Sarah found," Nathan said. "Evidence of the theft. Records of the charity fund embezzlement. Victoria must have hidden the papers in the dress, thinking they would be safe in her own clothing. And Sarah, honest to a fault, could not look away once she knew. So Richard Langley came to silence her," Claire finished. "And when she would not agree, when she said she was going to tell the truth, he poisoned her." The 3 of them stood in grim silence, the weight of it pressing down. Murder, corruption, a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of Redstone Valley society. And they were three people with no power, no connections, and no proof beyond a child's testimony and a servant's memories. We need evidence, Nathan said finally. Something concrete, something that cannot be dismissed or ignored. The dress, Claire said. If we can find it, if the papers are still in it. After a year after your mother's death and everything that followed, Grace shook her head. That dress is long gone, child. Probably burned the night Sarah died. Maybe not. Nathan was thinking fast. If Victoria had the dress in her possession, if Sarah was working on it when she died, then Victoria would have wanted it back. She paid for expensive materials, paid for Sarah's labor. She would have sent someone to collect her property. The landlady, Claire said, her eyes lighting up, Mrs. Garvey, she took all of Mama's things for back rent. She would have given the dress back to Mrs. Ashford, would she not? Probably, Grace said slowly, but that does not help us if the dress is in Victoria's house now. Unless it is not, Nathan said. Victoria is vain. She would not destroy an expensive ball gown just because the seamstress died. She would have it finished by someone else. Worn it, to prove she could, that a poor woman's death meant nothing to her schedule. Grace stared at him. You are saying she wore a dress with evidence of her crime sewn into the lining? I am saying Victoria Ashford is arrogant enough to think no one would ever dare look. They spent the rest of the day planning in earnest. The charity board meeting was Thursday. Today was Monday. That gave them 3 days to prepare, to gather courage, to make sure every detail was perfect, because they would only get one chance. Thursday morning came too fast and too slow. Nathan woke before dawn, his heart hammering in his chest, that irregular beat again, skipping and stuttering. He pressed his hand against his sternum and breathed slowly until it settled. Not now, not yet. Grace was already in the kitchen when he came down, dressed in the plain gray dress she used to wear when she worked for the Ashfords. She looked at him with eyes that held no fear, only grim determination. You do not have to do this, Nathan said. We can find another way. There is no other way, you know that. Grace poured coffee with steady hands. Besides, I have been waiting 12 years for a chance to walk into that house as something other than property. Today I walk in as a thief and a witness. That feels about right. Claire appeared in the doorway, already dressed, her hair braided so tight it pulled at her temples. I am ready. Claire, you are staying here, Nathan said. We discussed this. You and Ren stay at the ranch where it is safe. You need me. Ren drew the pictures, but I was there too. I remember which room, which wardrobe. Absolutely not. I am not putting a 9-year-old child in danger. You put us in danger the moment you brought us into this house, Claire said quietly. The moment the Ashfords realized we existed. We are already targets. At least this way we fight back. Nathan looked at Grace, who shrugged. The girl has a point, and she is small enough to fit through that side window if the doors are locked. Nathan wanted to argue, but he saw the truth in Claire's eyes. She was right. The Ashfords would come for them eventually, whether they acted or not. At least this way they had a chance. Fine, he said finally, but you follow orders exactly. No improvising, no heroics. Understood. Understood. And Ren stays here, with Mrs. Freeman watching her. Agreed. Mrs. Freeman, Grace's mother's old friend, arrived at dawn. She was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and hands that had seen hard work. She gathered Ren into her lap and held her close. You be careful, Mrs. Freeman said to Grace. That family destroyed your mama. Do not let them destroy you too. I will be careful, Grace promised. They left the ranch at 8 o'clock in the morning. Nathan looked back once and saw Ren standing in the doorway with Mrs. Freeman, her rabbit clutched to her chest, her green eyes tracking their departure. The ride to Redstone Valley took an hour. They approached from the east, circling wide to avoid being seen entering from the main road. The Ashford mansion sat on a hill overlooking the town, a white columned monument to wealth built on the backs of people like Grace's mother. They tied their horses in a grove of trees a quarter-mile from the house and approached on foot. Martha will be in the kitchen preparing lunch, Grace said as they crouched behind the garden wall. And Samuel will be cleaning the judge's study. That gives us maybe 20 minutes to get upstairs, find the dress, and get out. What if the wardrobe is locked? Claire asked. Then I picked the lock. Grace pulled a thin piece of metal from her pocket. I learned skills in that house that the Ashfords never intended. They moved quickly across the open lawn, using the cover of the rose garden to reach the side of the house. The window Claire had identified was on the second floor above the library. A trellis ran up the wall thick with climbing roses. "I will go first," Grace said. "Make sure the room is clear." Then Claire, "Nathan, you stay here and keep watch." "Like hell I am staying here." "You are 6 feet tall and built like a barn. You will make noise. I need quiet." Grace was already climbing before he could argue further. She moved up the trellis like smoke, making no sound despite the creaking wood. At the window, she paused, tested the latch. It swung open. She disappeared inside. 30 seconds later, her hand appeared beckoning. Claire climbed next, nimble as a cat. Nathan watched her small form ascend the trellis and slip through the window, and his heart climbed into his throat. This was insane. He was letting a 9-year-old girl break into the house of the most powerful family in the territory. But there was no turning back now. Nathan positioned himself where he could see both the driveway and the servants' entrance. His hand rested on the gun at his hip, though he prayed he would not need it. If this came down to violence, they had already lost. Inside the house, Grace and Claire moved through the library and into the hallway. The mansion was exactly as Grace remembered it. Thick carpets that swallowed sound. Wallpaper imported from France. Portraits of Ashford ancestors looking down with expressions of smug superiority. Victoria's bedroom was at the end of the hall. Grace tried the door. Locked. Grace moved to the second wardrobe, the one that held formal gowns. And there in the back, wrapped in muslin to protect it from dust, she found it. Crimson silk with gold embroidery. The initials V. Stitched into the hem. And when Grace ran her hands along the bodice lining, she felt the telltale crinkle of paper hidden in the seams. "Got it," she breathed. That was when they heard footsteps in the hallway. Grace and Claire froze. The footsteps came closer, measured and unhurried. A woman's tread. Then a voice. "Martha, I forgot my gloves. I am just running back to get them before the meeting resumes." Victoria Ashford. She was not supposed to be here. The meeting was supposed to last until noon. But fate and bad timing had conspired to put her in her own house at the exact moment 2 thieves were raiding her wardrobe. Grace made a split-second decision. She shoved the dress into Claire's arms, pushed the girl toward the window, and stepped into the hallway, pulling the bedroom door closed behind her. Victoria stopped at the top of the stairs, her hand on the banister. She was a handsome woman in her late 50s, dressed in expensive gray silk, her silver hair arranged in perfect waves. Her eyes widened when she saw Grace. "You," Victoria said, "I know you. You used to work here." "Yes, ma'am." Grace kept her voice level. "Grace Hartwell, what are you doing in my house? How did you get in?" "I came to talk to you about Sarah Hayes." The name hit like a slap. Victoria's face went very still, very careful. "I do not know what you are talking about." "Yes, you do. The seamstress who made your dresses. The one who died last year. The one your cousin murdered because she found evidence of your crimes." Victoria's hand tightened on the banister. "That is a very serious accusation. One that could land you in jail for slander. Not slander if it is true, and I have proof. You have nothing. Now get out of my house before I call the sheriff." "Call him." Grace took a step forward. "I would love to tell him how you have been stealing from the Territorial Charity Fund for years. How you falsified records. How you used that money to buy this house, these dresses, this life built on the backs of children and freed slaves who were supposed to receive that aid." Victoria's face had gone white. "You cannot prove any of that." "Maybe not, but Sarah Hayes could. She found your records, did she not, hidden in the lining of a dress you sent her to alter? And when she threatened to expose you, Richard Langley killed her." "You are insane. Richard would never—" "Richard would do anything you asked him to, including murder." Grace's voice was cold. "I worked in this house for 3 years. I heard you and the judge talking. I heard Richard reporting back on his errands. I know what kind of family you are. What kind of people you are willing to destroy to protect your position." Victoria's hand moved to the bell pull beside the stairs. "Samuel, Samuel, come here at once." Footsteps on the stairs below. A young black man appeared, his eyes going wide when he saw Grace. "Mrs. Ashford, this woman is trespassing. Restrain her until the sheriff arrives." Samuel looked at Grace, looked at Victoria, and something shifted in his face. A moment of recognition, of understanding, of solidarity that crossed the boundaries of employment and fear. Ma'am, that is an order, Samuel. Yes, ma'am. But he did not move toward Grace. Instead, he looked at her and gave the smallest shake of his head. A warning, or maybe an apology. Grace understood. Samuel was trapped just like she had been. He could not help her without losing his position, his livelihood, maybe his life. She did not blame him. It is all right, Grace said quietly. I am going. She turned and walked down the hallway away from Victoria's bedroom, where Claire was hopefully escaping through the window with the dress. She descended the stairs with Victoria following, descended into the grand foyer where the Ashford family crest was carved into the marble floor. Outside, Nathan saw Claire climb down the trellis with the dress bundled under her arm. He got her and the evidence away from the house and back to the horses. But he also saw the sheriff's wagon coming up the drive, saw them take Grace away in handcuffs. He wanted to go after her, wanted to fight, but Claire grabbed his arm with surprising strength. No, she said fiercely, that is what they want. They want you to make a scene, to give them an excuse to arrest you too. Then they take the dress and we lose everything. Her eyes were bright with tears, but her voice was steady. Grace knew this might happen. She sacrificed herself so we could get away. Do not make that sacrifice meaningless. Nathan watched the wagon disappear down the drive, taking his sister to a jail cell, and he had never felt more helpless in his life. They rode back to the ranch in silence. When they arrived, Mrs. Freeman took one look at their faces and knew. They got her. She let them take her so we could escape with the evidence, Claire said. She held out the bundled dress. We have it, the proof Sarah died for. Mrs. Freeman took the dress with shaking hands. Then we better make damn sure it counts for something, because they will come for the rest of you next. She was right. Grace was held overnight in the Redstone Valley jail. Nathan wanted to go to her immediately, wanted to demand her release, but Frederick Walsh, the lawyer he had hired, advised against it when the man arrived at the ranch that evening. Right now, they have her on trespassing, Walsh said. Victoria Ashford is deciding whether to press charges. If you make a scene, if you draw more attention to this, she will press them just to punish you. So we do nothing. We let Grace sit in a cell. We wait 24 hours. If Victoria does not file formal charges by then, they have to release her. And I suspect Victoria will not file because filing means explaining in court what Grace was there to find. It means opening that whole can of worms in public. Walsh was right. The next morning, Grace was released without charges. She returned to the ranch tired but unbroken, and the first thing she did was embrace both girls and tell them she was fine. But that same afternoon, a rider arrived at the ranch with an official-looking envelope. Nathan opened it and felt his blood run cold. It was a petition to the territorial court filed by Marianne Ashford on behalf of the Redstone Valley Child Welfare Board requesting an emergency hearing to review Nathan Cross's guardianship of Claire and Wren Hayes on grounds of moral unfitness, criminal association, and providing an unsuitable environment for vulnerable children. The hearing was set for 3 days hence. Judge Samuel Reed presiding. Not Judge William Ashford, Nathan noted. The Ashfords were being careful, making sure their own family stayed officially separate from the proceedings. But Marianne would be there as the petitioner, and Victoria would be watching from the gallery, making sure the message was clear. Give up the investigation or lose the children. Nathan read the document 3 times, then set it on the table where Claire could see it. What does this mean, she asked. It means they are trying to take you and Wren away from me. Can they do that? They can try. The hearing is in 3 days. We present our case, they present theirs, and Judge Reed decides. What if he decides they are right? What if he takes us away? Nathan looked at this resolute child who had been through too much, who deserved safety and certainty, and instead got endless battles and impossible choices. Then I fight it. I appeal. I make noise until someone listens. He paused. And if nobody listens? Nathan thought about his promise to Claire that first night, about the vow he had made at Sarah's grave. Then I take you and your sister, and we ride west until we are beyond the reach of the Ashford family. We start over somewhere. They cannot touch us. That is running away. That is protecting you. There is a difference, Northam. Claire studied his face for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and took his hand. I do not want to run. I want to fight. I want to stand in that courtroom and tell the truth about what happened to Mama. about what the Ashfords did, about all of it. Claire, you are 9 years old. The court might not even let you testify. Then make them let me. Her grip tightened. You said truth matters. Well, let me tell it. Let me fight for her the way you are fighting for us. Nathan squeezed her hand, feeling the calluses on her small fingers, the strength in her grip. All right, he said. We fight, all of us, together. But that night after the girls were in bed, Nathan sat alone in his study and faced a truth he had been avoiding. 2 days ago, he had gone to see Dr. Brennan, had asked him to run a test, had provided samples of his own blood and samples from both girls collected carefully from their hairbrushes while they slept. The letter had arrived that afternoon, delivered quietly by Dr. Brennan himself, rather than trusting it to a courier. Nathan had not opened it immediately, had carried it in his coat pocket through dinner, through putting the girls to bed. But now alone in the dark, he could not put it off any longer. He pulled out the envelope and opened it. The results were clear, definitive, scientific. Nathan Cross was not the biological father of Claire or Wren Hayes. The blood types did not match. The inheritance patterns were wrong. There was no genetic connection between them, which meant Sarah had been pregnant with someone else's child when Nathan left, or had gotten pregnant shortly after. Either way, these girls were not his daughters, not by blood, not by biology, not by any measure that the law would recognize as legitimate grounds for his attachment to them. He should have felt relieved, should have felt the weight of guilt lift, knowing that he had not abandoned his own children, had not caused Sarah to struggle alone with his offspring. Instead, he felt hollowed out, because somewhere in the past weeks he had started to believe they were his, had started to build a future in his mind where he was their father, not just by choice, but by right, where his love for them was validated by biology, made acceptable by blood. But they were not his, and loving them anyway, choosing them anyway, meant facing the world without that validation, meant standing up and saying, these are my daughters, when the law in society and even nature itself said they were not. It meant being brave in a way Nathan had never managed before. He heard a sound at the door and looked up to find Grace standing there. You got the results, Grace said. It was not a question. How did you know I even ordered the test? Because I know you needed to be sure before you committed to this fight. And now I am sure they are not mine. Grace came into the room and sat across from him. Does it matter? The law will say it does. Marianne Ashford will argue that I have no legitimate claim to these children, that I am a stranger who bought them on a whim and now should give them up to a proper family. And what will you say? Nathan looked down at the test results, at the scientific proof that he and these girls shared no blood. I will say that family is not made in the blood. It is made in the choice to stay. Even when staying is hard, especially when staying is hard. Grace reached across the desk and took the paper from his hands. She walked to the fireplace and threw it in. They watched it burn together, the evidence of biological disconnect turning to ash. There, Grace said. Now no one can use it against you. They will just order another test. Let them. By the time results come back, the hearing will be over. And you will have made your case. Not based on blood, but based on love. She turned to face him. That is what Sarah would have wanted. Not a biological father who showed up too late, but a chosen father who showed up when it mattered. Nathan nodded slowly. Then he asked the question that had been eating at him since the results arrived. Did you know before the test? I suspected. Claire does not look like you. Neither does Wren. They look like Sarah. And maybe they look like their real father, whoever he was. But they do not look like a cross. Why did you not say anything? Because it did not matter. Does not matter. You chose them. They chose you. That is enough. But it was not enough for Claire. Nathan discovered that the next morning when he found her sitting on the porch steps with the burned remains of the test results in her hands. She must have pulled them from the fireplace after everyone went to bed, must have pieced together enough of the charred paper to read the verdict. She looked up at him with eyes that held no surprise, no shock, just a kind of sad certainty. You know, Nathan said, sitting beside her. I have always known. Mama told me about my father before she died. His name was Thomas. He was a miner. He died in a collapse when I was 3. Wren was not even born yet. Mama was already pregnant with her when it happened. Nathan felt the last piece of the puzzle click into place. So when I showed up at the auction, I thought maybe you were trying to make up for leaving her, for being one of the men who hurt her by leaving. But I never thought you were my actual father. Mama told me the truth. She did not want me to spend my life wondering. Then why did you not tell me? Because you needed to believe it. Claire looked at the burned paper in her hands. You needed to think we might be yours so you would have a reason to keep us, to fight for us. I was afraid if you knew the truth, you would realize you did not owe us anything, that you could walk away with a clear conscience. Nathan felt something crack open in his chest. Claire, I am not walking away, not now, not ever. You and Ren are not my biological children, but you are my daughters. The ones I chose, the ones who chose me back. And that matters more than any blood test. Claire's eyes filled with tears. People will say you are crazy, that you have no real claim to us. Let them say it. I have spent 7 years caring what people think, and it got me nothing but loneliness. I would rather have you and your sister in the whole world's judgment than go back to that empty house and that empty life. What about the hearing? What about the Ashfords? We fight, we tell the truth. We show Judge Reed that family is built on more than biology. Nathan stood up, and we trust that justice exists even in a system designed to protect the powerful. Claire wiped her eyes and stood up. Then we better get ready, because the Ashfords will not make this easy. She was right. The morning of the hearing dawned hot and cloudless. Nathan dressed in his best suit, the one he had worn to his father's funeral 7 years ago. The black wool felt heavy in the summer heat, but it was appropriate. Today felt like a funeral too, either the death of his hopes or the death of the Ashford family's grip on Redstone Valley. Claire wore a new dress that Abigail Morrison from town had made for her, simple and clean, a pale blue that made her look even younger than her 9 years. And Wren wore yellow, the color of hope, with a rabbit tucked under her arm. Grace stood with them in the hallway, straightening Nathan's collar with hands that were perfectly steady. You remember what Walsh told you, she asked. Let them make their case first. Do not react. Let the lawyer handle the objections. And when it is your turn, tell the truth. Nathan looked down at the girls. All of it. The courthouse was packed when they arrived. Half of Redstone Valley had turned out, drawn by gossip and the promise of scandal. Nathan saw familiar faces in the crowd, people he had known for years but kept at arm's length. The shopkeeper, the reverend, neighbors from distant ranches. And in the front row, Marianne Ashford, dressed in a gown that cost more than most families earned in a year, her expression arranged in careful concern. 2 rows back sat Victoria Ashford, her face a mask of polite interest. But Nathan saw the calculation in her eyes, the way she tracked every movement like a hawk watches prey. Judge Samuel Reed called the court to order. He was a big man, white-haired and weathered, with eyes that had presided over 100 cases and seen most forms of human weakness. He looked at the packed courtroom and shook his head slightly, as if already regretting the circus this was about to become. We are here to consider a petition filed by Mrs. Marianne Ashford regarding the guardianship of Claire and Wren Hayes, currently in the care of Mr. Nathan Cross. Mrs. Ashford, you may present your case. Marianne stood her lawyer beside her. Marcus Garrett, imported from Denver, a man with a voice like silk over steel. Your Honor, Garrett began, this case is quite simple. Mr. Cross is a bachelor rancher with no experience in child rearing, no female presence in his household to provide proper moral guidance, and no legitimate connection to these children. He purchased them at an orphan auction in a moment of what can only be described as impulse, and has since been operating under the delusion that good intentions are sufficient to make a family. He let the words hang in the air, poisonous and persuasive. Garrett called his witnesses. A neighbor who testified that Nathan had lived in isolation for 7 years, rarely socializing. The shopkeeper who confirmed Nathan did not participate in community events. Reverend Matthews, who said Nathan had not attended church in 5 years. A man disconnected from his community, Garrett summarized, is a man ill-equipped to raise children who need social connections, moral education, and integration into civilized society. Nathan sat through it all, his jaw tight, his hands clenched beneath the table. Walsh, his lawyer, made notes, but did not object. This was the strategy. Let them paint their picture, then dismantle it. Finally, Garrett called Victoria Ashford to the stand. She took the oath with a hand on the Bible, her voice clear and steady. Under Garrett's questioning, she explained that she had employed Sarah Hayes as a seamstress, had always found her work satisfactory, had been saddened to hear of her death. "And did you have any contact with Miss Hayes in the days before her death?" Garrett asked. "No," Victoria said smoothly. "I was out of town at the time visiting family in Denver. I did not learn of her passing until I returned 2 weeks later." "So you certainly did not have any altercation with her? Any dispute?" "Of course not. Sarah was a valued employee. I had no reason to wish her harm." It was smoothly done, perfectly delivered. Victoria was establishing an alibi, creating distance between herself and Sarah's death before anyone could suggest a connection. Walsh stood for cross-examination. "Mrs. Ashford, you say you were in Denver when Sarah Hayes died. Can you provide documentation of that, hotel receipts? Perhaps witnesses who saw you there?" Victoria smiled. "I was staying with my sister. I am sure she would be happy to testify if needed." "I am sure she would. How convenient that family can always be relied upon to support family." Walsh paused, letting the implications sink in. "Mrs. Ashford, do you recognize this dress?" He held up the crimson silk, and Nathan saw Victoria's face go very still. "It looks like one of mine." "More than looks like. This is the dress Sarah Hayes was working on when she died. The dress you wore to the governor's ball 3 months ago, is it not?" Walsh held up the fabric, showed the courtroom, the gold VA stitched into the hem. Victoria's jaw tightened. "If you say so." "I do say so, and I also say that this dress contains something very interesting in its lining." Walsh produced the papers, unfolded them for the court to see. "Records of the Territorial Charity Fund, showing systematic theft over a period of 5 years, showing money diverted from orphanages and hospitals and schools into private accounts. Accounts controlled by you, Mrs. Ashford." The courtroom erupted. Whispers became shouts. People stood to see better. Judge Reed banged his gavel. "Order, order in this court." Victoria had gone white. "I have no idea what you are talking about. If those papers were in my dress, they were planted there." "By whom?" Walsh asked. "By Sarah Hayes, who found them hidden in a dress you sent her to alter. By Sarah, who threatened to expose your crimes and was murdered for it." "Objection." Garrett was on his feet. "Your Honor, this is outrageous. My client is not on trial here. This hearing is about Mr. Cross's fitness as a guardian, not wild accusations of murder." "Your Honor," Walsh said calmly, "the two issues are connected. Mrs. Ashford is attempting to remove these children from Mr. Cross's care because they are witnesses to her crimes. Claire Hayes saw her mother murdered. Ren Hayes can identify the killer. This petition is not about child welfare. It is about silencing witnesses." Reed's expression was thunderous. "Counselor, those are serious charges. Do you have evidence to support them?" "I do, Your Honor. I call Claire Hayes to the stand." Claire stood. Her legs were shaking, but her spine was straight. She walked to the witness box and took the oath in a voice that only trembled slightly. Then she looked out at the courtroom, at the sea of faces watching her, and began to speak. "My name is Claire Hayes. I am 9 years old, and I watched my mother die." She told them everything, about the night a man came to their boarding house, about the argument she overheard, about the tea that was poured, about her mother's convulsions, about the man who walked away. "That man was Richard Langley," Claire said, pointing at the gallery where a tall man with gray temples sat frozen. "He poisoned my mother because she found evidence that Victoria Ashford was stealing from the charity fund, evidence that would have destroyed the Ashford family if it became public." Richard Langley stood abruptly. "This is absurd. I will not sit here and listen to a child's fantasy." "Sit down, Mr. Langley," Judge Reed said quietly. "I will not be accused by some orphan with delusions." "I said sit down." Reed's voice cracked like a whip. Two deputies stepped forward. Langley sat, his face mottled with rage. Walsh continued questioning Claire, drawing out every detail of that night. Her voice never wavered. She was a child, but she testified like someone who had learned early that truth was the only weapon she had. Then Walsh called Grace to the stand. Grace walked to the witness bus with her head high. She took the oath and met the courtroom's eyes without flinching. "My name is Grace Hartwell. I worked in the Ashford household for 3 years, and I witnessed Victoria Ashford and Richard Langley discussing the theft of charity funds on multiple occasions." She testified to conversations overheard, to records she had seen, to the systematic corruption that had enriched the Ashfords while children went hungry and schools went without books. Then, without being asked, Grace rolled up her sleeve. The scars were visible, even from the back of the courtroom. Long, thin lines, faded but unmistakable. These are the marks I received 12 years ago, Grace said, her voice level. When I was beaten for overhearing conversations I was not meant to hear. Conversations about stealing from the very fund that was supposed to help people like me, like my mother, like every freed slave trying to build a life in this territory. The courtroom had gone completely silent. On cross-examination, Garrett tried to attack her credibility. Why did you not speak up before, he demanded? Why wait until now? Grace looked at him with eyes that had seen things he could not imagine. Because I was a black woman working for a white family in Colorado, she said flatly. Because speaking up would have gotten me killed. Because I had no proof and no power and no reason to believe anyone would listen to me over them. She leaned forward. I do not ask you to believe me because I am righteous. I ask you to look at the evidence, the papers in the dress. Do you understand that some people want to take you away from Mr. Cross? Wren nodded again, her hands tightening on her rabbit. And do you want to stay with Mr. Cross? Wren nodded so hard her whole body moved. I appreciate that, child, but I need more than a nod. I need to understand what you want, what you need. Reed's voice was kind but firm. Can you show me any way you can? Wren sat very still. The courtroom held its breath. Marianne Ashford leaned forward, victory already forming in her expression. The child could not speak, could not testify. The case was as good as won. Then Wren reached under her rabbit and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She unfolded it carefully, held it up for Reed to see. It was a drawing, 3 figures standing in front of a house. A tall man in a hat, a girl with wild hair holding his hand, and a smaller girl between them holding both their hands. Above the house in shaky but legible letters was a single word, home. The courtroom went dead silent. Then Wren's mouth opened. Her eyes found Nathan across the room and she spoke. Not Papa, not the word everyone expected. Instead, Wren said, Victoria Ashford poisoned Mama. Her voice was small and rusty from disuse, but it carried in the silent courtroom like a gunshot. I saw her, not just Richard. Victoria was there too. The courtroom erupted. Reed's gavel could barely be heard over the noise. She came after Richard left. Wren continued, her voice growing stronger. She told Mama that she should have burned the papers when she had the chance, that she should have kept her mouth shut. Wren's face crumpled, but she kept going. And then she poured more poison in Mama's tea, made her drink it. And Mama, her voice broke. Mama looked at me and Claire and she tried to tell us to run, but she could not talk anymore. And then she just stopped moving. Victoria Ashford shot to her feet. This is absurd. A child's fantasy. I was in Denver. I told you. You were supposed to be in Denver, Wren said, still looking at Judge Reed. But you came back early. You came back because Richard told you Mama would not listen, that she was going to expose you. So you came back and you killed her yourself. This child is lying. She has been coached. Wren does not lie, Claire said from her seat. Wren has not spoken in a year because she was too scared of what happened. But she is not scared anymore. She is telling the truth. Judge Reed banged his gavel until the noise subsided. When order was finally restored, his face was grave. Mrs. Ashford, Mr. Langley, you will both remain in this courtroom. Deputies make sure of it. He turned to Wren. Miss Wren, I know this is hard, but I need to ask you some questions. Can you do that? Wren nodded. You said you saw Victoria Ashford poison your mother. Are you absolutely certain it was her? Yes. How can you be sure it was dark? You were scared. I'm sure. Wren's voice was clear now. She wore the red dress, the one Mama was making for her, and she had a ring with a green stone that caught the light. And she smelled like roses, the same roses that grow in her garden. I remember because Mama used to take me with her when she delivered dresses, and I always smelled those roses. Reed looked at Victoria. Mrs. Ashford, do you own a ring with a green stone? Victoria's hand moved involuntarily to her right hand, where a large emerald ring sat on her finger. She caught herself, but too late. That proves nothing, Garrett said, but his voice lacked conviction. Perhaps not by itself, Reed agreed, But combined with the documentary evidence, the testimony of multiple witnesses, and the fact that a 5-year-old child has just broken a year of silence to accuse you, he shook his head. Mrs. Ashford, I am ordering an investigation into the death of Sarah Hayes, and I am placing you under house arrest pending the outcome of that investigation. Victoria's face went white. You cannot do this. My husband is a judge. I have rights. Your husband is a judge in a different circuit. He has no jurisdiction here. And as for your rights, you will have every opportunity to defend yourself. But right now, I have heard enough to warrant serious concern. Reed turned to the deputies. Take her into custody. As Victoria was led away, still protesting, Marianne Ashford stood slowly. She looked at her mother-in-law, then at the crimson dress, then at the two girls sitting beside Nathan. Your Honor, Marianne said quietly, I would like to withdraw my petition. Garrett grabbed her arm. Mrs. Ashford, we discussed this. We had a strategy. Marianne pulled her arm free. The strategy was based on protecting my family. But I will not protect murderers. I will not take children away from a man who loves them in order to shield a woman who killed their mother. She looked at Nathan. Mr. Cross, I apologize. I was wrong about you, and I was wrong to let my family's influence blind me to the truth. She walked out of the courtroom without waiting for a response, leaving Garrett standing alone. Judge Reed waited until the chaos subsided, then addressed Nathan directly. Mr. Cross, I have a question for you, and I want you to answer honestly. Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Brennan submitted medical records to this court this morning at my request. Blood test results showing the biological relationship between you and these children. Nathan's stomach dropped. Of course. Any judge reviewing a guardianship case would want medical documentation. Reed's face was grave. The results indicate no genetic connection. You are not their biological father. Is that correct? That is correct, Your Honor. And yet you are here today fighting for the right to keep them. Why? Nathan stood slowly. He looked at Claire, who was watching him with eyes too old for her 9 years. At Wren, who had found her voice to tell the truth. At Grace, who had risked everything to stand with him. Because I love them, Your Honor. Not because of biology or obligation or guilt. Just love. Pure and simple. Nathan's voice was steady. They are my daughters. The ones I chose when no one else would. The ones who chose me back when I gave them every reason not to. And I will fight for them every day for the rest of my life. Even knowing that the law gives you no legitimate claim that anyone could challenge this at any time. Then I will fight every challenge. I will stand in front of every judge. I will make my case again and again until the world understands that these girls belong with me. Not because of blood, but because of love. Reed was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Mr. Cross, I am going to ask you one more question, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer. Yes, Your Honor. Do you promise to raise these children with honesty, integrity, and love, to give them education and opportunity, to protect them from harm, to be their father in every way that matters, even when it is hard, even when others question you, even when the easy road would be to walk away? Nathan looked at Claire and Wren. They looked back at him, hope and fear warring in their young faces. I promise, Your Honor, with everything I am and everything I have. Reed nodded slowly. Then he picked up his gavel and brought it down with a crack that echoed through the silent courtroom. The petition is denied. Full legal guardianship is granted to Nathan Cross. Furthermore, I am ordering expedited adoption proceedings to make this arrangement permanent and irrevocable. He looked at the girls. Claire Wren, you will remain with Mr. Cross. And from this day forward, you will be known as Claire and Wren Cross, daughters not by blood but by choice. And that is the strongest kind of family there is. Claire burst into tears. Wren climbed out of the witness box and ran to Nathan, who caught her and held her while she cried into his shoulder. And for the first time in over a year, the crying made sound. Great gulping sobs of relief and release in the understanding that she was finally truly safe. Nathan held both his daughters while the courtroom erupted in applause and tears. He held them and felt the weight of 7 years of loneliness lift from his shoulders. He held them and knew that he had finally found what he had been running from. A reason to stay, a reason to fight, a reason to believe that redemption was possible even for cowards who showed up too late. The days following the hearing passed in a strange kind of peace. Victoria Ashford was formally charged with murder and embezzlement. Richard Langley, faced with overwhelming evidence, confessed to his role in Sarah's death in exchange for a reduced sentence. He would spend 20 years in territorial prison. Victoria, who had actually administered the final dose of poison, was convicted and sentenced to hang. The sentence was carried out 3 months later on a cold October morning. Nathan did not attend, neither did the girls. Some endings did not need to be witnessed to be real. The money stolen from the charity fund was recovered and distributed to the institutions it had been meant for. Orphanages, hospitals, schools. The Ashford estate was liquidated to pay restitution. Judge William Ashford resigned in disgrace and left Colorado. Marianne Ashford stayed quietly, using what remained of her personal fortune to fund a home for orphaned children in Redstone Valley. She named it the Sarah Hayes Memorial Home. Life at the ranch settled into a rhythm. Claire began to smile more. Not often, not easily, but the moments came. Grace teaching her to make biscuits. Nathan showing her how to ride. Small victories. Wren spoke more each day. Her voice grew stronger, less rusty. She talked to everyone now, though she still carried her rabbit everywhere. One evening, Nathan found Wren in the barn. She was sitting in the hayloft drawing. When he climbed up to join her, he saw that this drawing was different. It showed 4 people. A man, 2 girls, and a woman with dark skin and eyes that looked like they could see through walls. "That is us," Wren said. "You, me, Claire, and Grace." "It is a good picture." "It is family," Wren corrected. Grace said family does not have to be people who look the same or came from the same place. She said family is people who choose to stay. Nathan felt his throat tighten. "Grace is a smart woman." "She is your sister, right?" "She is." "But you did not always act like it." "No, we did not." "Why not?" Nathan considered how to explain complicated history, but Wren was 5. She deserved truth in words she could understand. "Because we were both hurt by the same person. My father, her father. And instead of helping each other heal, we stayed apart. But we are trying to do better now." Wren nodded. "I am glad she stayed. Grace makes good pancakes." Nathan laughed. "She does." "And I am glad you stayed too," Wren added. "Even though you are scared sometimes, I can tell. Your hands shake when you think we are not looking." Nathan's hands were shaking now. The tremor had gotten worse in recent weeks, the irregular heartbeat more frequent. He had been ignoring it, telling himself it was stress. But Wren was right. He was scared. Scared that his heart would give out like his father's had. Scared that he would leave these girls orphaned again. "I am scared," Nathan admitted, "but not of staying. I am scared of leaving before I have given you everything you need." Wren looked at him. "Mama said the best thing she could teach us was how to be brave when we are scared. She said brave is not about not being afraid. It is about doing the right thing anyway." "Your mother was right." "Then you are brave," Wren said, "because you are scared and you stayed anyway." Nathan pulled her into his lap. "You are brave too, the bravest person I know." They sat there as the sun set, painting the Colorado sky in shades of orange and gold. 6 months later, on a cold February morning, 4 people stood in the Redstone Valley Cemetery before a new headstone carved from white marble. Sarah Elizabeth Hayes, beloved mother, 1854 to 1883. She made something beautiful out of whatever she was handed. Claire placed flowers at the base. Wren set down a drawing protected by glass showing Sarah sewing by lamplight with 2 small girls at her feet. Grace stood with her hand on Wren's shoulder. Nathan knelt, placed his palm flat against the cold marble. "Sarah, I am sorry I was not there when you needed me. I am sorry I ran instead of staying. I am sorry I chose the easy road over the right one." His voice was rough. "But I want you to know that your daughters are safe. They are loved. They have a home and a future and every opportunity I can give them. I am not their biological father, but I am their father in every way that counts. And I will make sure they know every day that they are wanted, that they are chosen, that they are worth fighting for." He paused. "Grace is teaching them to cook your recipes. Claire is learning to sew. And Wren draws pictures of you that keep you alive in ways I never could with words. They remember you, they honor you, and they know that the strength they have comes from you. Claire knelt beside him, added her hand to his on the stone. Mama, I found a family, not the one you might have wanted for me, but the one I needed. Papa Nathan is not perfect, but he stays, and staying is what matters. Wren knelt on Nathan's other side. She placed her drawing against the headstone, a gift for the mother who could no longer see it. Grace knelt behind all three, hands on their shoulders. Sarah, you raised warriors, and we will make sure the world knows it. They stayed there for a long time, four people bound together by loss and choice, and the understanding that family was not about blood, but about the decision to stay when leaving would be easier. Finally, they stood and walked back to the wagon together. As they crested the hill that overlooked the ranch, Wren spoke. Papa, can we stop here for a minute? Nathan pulled the wagon to a halt. Wren climbed down and walked to the edge of the overlook. The ranch house, the barns, the corrals, the pastures running to the horizon, all of it bathed in morning light, all of it solid and real and theirs. This is ours, Wren asked. This is ours, Nathan confirmed. Forever. Wren nodded, satisfied. Then she opened her notebook and began to draw. Not the ranch below, but the four of them standing on this hill, looking at everything they had built together. When she finished, she wrote across the top in careful letters, Our family, February 1885, forever. And beneath it in smaller letters, We chose each other. That is enough. Nathan looked at those words and felt something settle in his chest. Something that had been restless and seeking for 7 years finally came to rest. She was right. They had chosen each other. And that was not just enough. It was everything. Nathan Cross lived another 18 years, long enough to see Claire graduate from Teachers College, long enough to see Wren's art displayed in galleries, long enough to walk Claire down the aisle, long enough to hold Wren's first child, a daughter, with Sarah's dark hair and fierce eyes. He died in his sleep on a summer night in 1903 at the age of 60, with both his daughters and 3 grandchildren in the house. At his funeral, Claire spoke about the man who had chosen them when no one else would, about the father who had taught them that love was a verb, not a feeling, that family was built on showing up day after day, even when it was hard. And Wren read from the journal Nathan had kept, entries about watching the girls grow, about the terror and joy of being a father, about the day Claire called him Papa for the first time, about the moment he realized he would rather die having loved them for whatever time he had than live forever having chosen safety over courage. They buried him next to Sarah. 2 headstones side by side. Sarah Elizabeth Hayes, beloved mother. She made something beautiful out of whatever she was handed. Nathan Cross, beloved father. He learned to stay. In the years that followed, when Claire's children and Wren's children asked about the man in the old photographs, they would tell them the truth. He was not our grandfather by blood. He was our grandfather by choice. And that made all the difference. The ranch stayed in the family for 3 more generations. The house Nathan built still stands weathered, but solid. In the parlor above the fireplace hangs a drawing, 4 figures standing on a hill, a man, 2 girls, a woman, and above them, our family, forever. We chose each other. That is enough. It hangs there still, a reminder, a benediction, a promise kept. The story of the ones we choose.